So, Colleen, welcome back to the podcast. After we stopped recording last time and I was editing, I kept thinking, oh, we didn't talk about that. Oh my God, we didn't talk about that. So, thanks for coming back on so we can talk about that.
Absolutely.
So, you were asking me just before recording what I learned upon editing the first episode that you were on. It reminded me that I remember thinking of you as like a third parent. You were the primary babysitter and the attentive older sibling. Mark is
Right.
a good big brother, but he's not as maternal and attentive and concerned. You were very concerned not only with me but with Kevin, our younger brother, and you have a daycare, and you're just very attentive and oriented towards kids. Did you think of yourself as like another mom to me growing up?
Not at all. And, as far as the question, not so much like, what did you learn? But I was wondering if everything that we talked about might reveal different feelings or old feelings or different perspectives because you have more detail and it comes from an adult perspective versus a child perspective. But I did not see myself as that at all. It was more of a out of necessity, I guess. I mean, that's what it felt like at the time, was that this is my role. But having said that, my feelings about you and Kevin as my younger brothers were that you guys were so easy to be around. You were easygoing, pretty independent too. You did your own thing, and for the most part respectful. I'm hearing stories later now that I don't remember, that might not have been, your own story for one, that might not have been the most respectful, but that's not how I remember things. I remember things being very easy, a job that was not hard to do, that's for
Mm.
sure. And it wasn't until other people kind of would say perspectives like, you guys get along so well, and when that's just the way things are, you assume that's the way things are for everybody. So you don't really appreciate it as something unique and special, but it really is. It really is.
Yeah.
You don't have to love and like your siblings, and so I feel really lucky that I not only love every one of you guys, I like every one of you.
Yeah, me too. It's rarer than I would have thought it would have been. So I have a bunch of things that I want to get to. But another thing we talked about before we started recording is you said, wow, you got a lot of books behind you. And
Yeah.
at a certain point in my academic and clinical career, I realized the value of books, which sounds really silly because, of course, everyone understands that books are valuable. But in our family, we were not a literate family. Dad read the newspaper, but I don't remember mom and dad or you and Mark reading much or talking about literature or even just popular novels like Stephen King or anything. I
Right.
will sometimes realize this when I hear other people talk about what it was like growing up in their family, and the way they talked about reading certain novels together, talking about literature, their parents reading books and talking about it at the dinner table. Our parents come from humble backgrounds, and so it took me a long time to realize that if I'm going to be a serious academic, this is like halfway through my academic career, by the way, that I suddenly realized if I'm going to be a serious academic and I'm going to be an authority on all the topics that I need to be an authority on, I need to actually have these books not only read, but at the ready, because I need to reference them. I need to look at them. I need to digest them repeatedly. I need to recommend passages. And I started to build this library in my office. But before that, I hated books because I'm a very, very slow reader because of mild dyslexia. And I also just hated the having to move them from place to place. So do you remember our family being not very book oriented?
Not early on. It wasn't until I don't even know, might have been in junior high, high school, college. I don't know. I just know it wasn't as a youngster, really young. But I do know and remember mom reading. she would have books, but she didn't talk about them, you know. And there was always a book on the back of mom and dad's toilet. I don't know who was reading.
I remember Reader's Digest being a thing.
Yeah.
We also didn't have a bookshelf. I don't know. I just find it interesting that as an academic and an author,
Yeah.
it was a struggle to get to a place where I felt comfortable around literature and around reading and around writing. But anyway, so tell me about a recent event in which you were on Facebook and someone within your social circle suddenly realized you were associated with psychology in Seattle.
Oh, gosh. It was so fun. It was totally unexpected, but I was on an unrelated Facebook group, and sure enough, I see you pop up in one of the posts, and you're on someone's television screen. They're commenting that this is what they do in their downtime is follow you, and commented on their post that, you know, hey, that's my brother. And they were so excited. They were like, at first, like, for real? Are you really his sister? But one of them had followed you deep enough to remember that you had mentioned you had a sister named Colleen. So that validated it a little bit, you know, or not validated, validated it.
Your Facebook name is Colleen Honda, or Colleen
Honda Bentley.
Right.
So at least my name is consistent with yours, right?
Right.
So they were not sure, but then they connected the dots and they trusted that there was an authentic connection there.
Yeah, your name came up a lot when I was watching Love is Blind season 3, I think, and there's a reality TV show and a cast member named Colleen. Did you watch Love is Blind?
I did not.
So,
but I remember you bringing this up and asking me.
Right. Yeah, I forgot that till you just said that on the show. She seemed to pronounce her name Colleen. People on the show were talking with her, calling her Colleen. So then on the reaction video, I'm like, her name is Colleen. It's not Colleen or whatever else they were saying. And I'm getting all hot and bothered about it. Then I talk with you and I ask you, your name is Colleen, right? Because even some people in our family, like in-laws, will call you Colleen, or there's a slight difference to the way they say your name. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to make sure, because I was going on the record on a video that I was publishing, that your name was definitely Colleen, not Colleen or anything. And so I asked you, figuring you would say, yeah, of course, my name is Colleen. But you said something different. What's your take on this?
Well, the history is apparently, so my name is spelled with 2 L's and 2 E's. So it's pretty phonetic and, 2 syllables. But mom and dad told me pretty early on that originally they intended me to go by Colleen, but everybody kept pronouncing my name Colleen. So it just gradually evolved to Colleen.
The other pronunciation is Colleen.
Colleen.
Yeah.
And that is how Mark pronounces my name, is Colleen. And that's how I pronounce my name now, is because it's quick and fast. Other family members say my name like Colleen. It's very open.
Yeah.
Oh, Colleen. That's how Cliff says my name.
Your husband.
Yeah.
So that's more like calling someone on the phone.
Yeah.
I'm calling them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I say it, if it's me and you and people I know, I say Colleen.
Colleen.
It's real. Yeah, Colleen.
And if someone called you Colleen, how would you feel about it?
I might notice it. I honestly don't know if I would.
If you hear it, does it bother you?
Not at all. I don't. Maybe it's because of what mom and dad told me. I don't know, but it doesn't bug me.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a Gen X thing, honestly, because for me, people will call me Kurt or Keith and other sorts of names, Craig. It just doesn't really faze me, because for 90% of especially my childhood, no one got my name right. No one pronounced it right. No one spelled it right. I once had a teacher give me an award for, in third grade, where it was Kink Honda. Kink Honda. How do you get that wrong?
Right. Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
the R and the N aren't even close to each other on the keyboard, so it's not like a typo. They literally thought my name was Kink. Yeah, it just doesn't really faze me. But I feel like other generations, they will,
Yeah.
it's very important. And, God bless them. Maybe it's just higher self-esteem. We're the lost generation, so maybe we're just happy that we're being acknowledged or something.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I call it Gen X, because
Oh,
we're like we
kind of
don't
no
matter.
definition.
Yeah, they didn't just pick a random letter. They just thought that, the previous generations mattered, and we
Yeah.
were like the slackers that were in the background. We didn't have any cohesion or any kind of, central experience. We were all latchkey kids, although you and I weren't latchkey kids. Anyway,
Right.
how many parents today would just let people bulldoze their child's name? Most parents
Right.
today would say, it's not Colleen, it's Colleen. Most parents
Right.
would
To
really
emphasize.
drill that into you. Whereas mom and dad are just like, I guess everyone pronounces it Colleen. Oh, well, I guess her name is Colleen now.
Well, and mom and dad say my name like you do, which is specific two
Oh.
syllables, Colleen, and they have equal. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, and our name isn't Honda, it's Honda, but technically.
Right.
So you're all over the place, Colleen. And then you married a Bentley, which is
Right.
hilarious for people that don't know. It's another car company.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So another story, if you remember, can you tell me about when I fell down the stairs at Hayden Lake? Sometimes people on video or pictures will notice that I have what looks like some sort of anomaly on my upper lip. I don't know how to say that. And people will think that it's a genetic thing or something, but it's a scar. It's a very, very deep and gnarly scar that I got from when I was, I think, 18 months old. So this is the story of how I got that scar.
So, okay. So I'm trying to think. I would have been 6.5-ish
Yeah.
at the time, and Mark would have been 8.5-ish.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were at Grandma and Granddad's A-frame house, and it was pretty modern, pretty mid-century modern, and it had the slat stairs. What do they call those, though? There's a name for them.
I don't know what they're called technically, but I always think of
stairs or something.
platform or like deck stairs. If you look down through the stairs, you can see the floor below, which is another set of stairs going the opposite direction, and they are concrete.
Yes,
And they go to the outside.
Concrete stairs that have rough edges as well.
Right.
So we had gone up the stairs, Mark and I, to go to bed, and unbeknownst to us, you had followed us and crawled up the stairs behind us. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I do remember kind of mom exclaiming, like, oh.
I don't remember. This is how I remember it being told, was that it might have been like a commercial during TV or something. And you and Mark ran upstairs temporarily and you were coming back down. So I followed you up.
Oh.
And then you scampered down the stairs past me, but I hadn't learned as a toddler how to go backwards crawl. So apparently I just turned around head first, figuring, well, that's how you crawl, so I need to go back down the stairs. So I turned around and then I fell through the stairs.
Right, except that you were hanging on.
Right. So do you remember this at all, or is it just from memories of mom and dad telling?
I just remember the vision from the top. I don't even remember coming back down. I remember seeing you from the top, looking down and seeing you suspended, hanging on by fingers onto about midway. You weren't near the top or the bottom, and you were midway holding on to the platform. And so all I could see was the top half of your face and your hands.
Well, what's so bizarre is, I had a giant ass head and relatively small hands. So how could I manage to grip, to support the weight of my giant skull? That's quite a feat. So then what happened?
That's all I remember. I don't remember how mom retrieved you or anything. I just remember like being kind of frozen with fear, like one, how can he be holding on like that? And two, what if he lets go? You know?
Right. That's the other thing. Like, because you don't know what a
Maybe
kid is
your
going to
big
be.
ass head is going to save you and keep you from falling the rest of the way.
And the near deathness of this is that
Yeah.
below me at about 15 feet is this gnarly, rough concrete set of stairs that would have, since I'm so head heavy, I just would have instantly flipped over. I'm the opposite of like a cat, I would always land on my head. And then mom grabs me. She runs up. What I think happened was I turned around head first and I fell down a few steps and I smashed my head into these mid-century modern wood sharp stairs and completely opened up my lip. I think it was completely split open because I had stitches.
Yeah.
So another story is me falling off the ping pong table, also at grandma and granddad's house, but their actual home in Spokane. Do you remember that story?
You had a lot of kind of major injuries in your young childhood that you could attribute it to being clumsy, but I don't think any of it was clumsy. It was just odd. There were things that just wouldn't normally happen to a small child, and you weren't doing anything mischievous or whatever, but things just kept happening to you.
Well, the story was that I was on a ping pong table, right?
Maybe it was a ping pong table, but it was a table of some kind.
Yeah, a tall table. And again,
yes.
Concrete floors, but this time
yeah.
It's mid-century modern, very fancy concrete, like painted and treated concrete in the basement of their very fancy house because, mom's parents, the dad was a very accomplished builder in Spokane and designed and built his very fancy house in the 50s and had this really cool basement that we'd hang out in. So you don't remember this. You don't remember because you were there. I thought that all the cousins were downstairs and the parents were upstairs.
Right. It was definite. And it was some formal gathering. It might have been Christmas. It might have been something else. But in my head, it was Christmas. And you were on the table.
So I must have been a year old at this point.
Maybe. Yeah, I was thinking you were closer to 2.
Okay.
And there was some kind of display on the table, and I want to say it was one of Uncle Chris's, some trains, because he had an elaborate train set down there. And you were playing, and you were doing your own thing. And I don't recall being down there myself. I had come down to join the cousin party that was going on down there. And just as I came down and entered that main room, I see you scoot backwards and fall back off the table. You probably cried, be my guest, if that you did, but I instantly ran back upstairs to tell mom and dad that you fell off the table. When we came back downstairs, all the cousins had surrounded you to help out and stuff, but that's the extent of my memory of it. But I do know it's once again you hurting your head.
Yeah.
And falling off and just doing your own thing,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think of there's other injuries, but I'm trying to think of other head injuries. One time I was on a slip and slide with Steven. I went a little too vigorously and, because if you take a running start and then you jump up and then you land on your ass, and it's a slip and slide, your ass is going to come out from underneath you, and like a fulcrum or a lever, your head is just going to come slamming down on the ground, which is what happened to me. And I remember I had that experience that they will show on TV where someone will be knocked out for a few seconds and they'll have like an elaborate long dream of some sort, which is what happened to me. I had this really long dream, and then I woke up and Steven's standing over me. And I'm like, how long was I out for? And he's like, just like a few seconds. I was like, oh my God, it's just like the movies. I had this really long dream. Again, no hospital care or anything. And then,
Did you even tell mom?
no, I mean, why?
I know.
What's she
Back
going to
then it
do?
was like, you're better and you're not bleeding, so we carry on.
Yeah, why would you even mention it? It's like,
Right.
it's over and done with. And in football, just several concussions and one particularly concerning one where
Oh no.
I wasn't unconscious. It wasn't even a concussion. I don't think it was a minor spinal temporary injury where I hit this guy, hit him weirdly head first. I wasn't usually doing that, but in the melee, sometimes it just happens. And I hit him and I felt I was on my back and I couldn't feel my entire body. It was completely numb from the neck down. And I'm looking up at the sky, and I remember I just was staring up at the sky thinking, oh, is this what being paralyzed feels like?
Wow.
Oh boy, this is weird. And then that feeling you get when, your leg will fall asleep, and then when it starts to wake up, you get this tingling feeling, right?
Yep.
I got that feeling throughout my entire body all at the same time very quickly. It didn't last, the way it normally will last, like 5 minutes or something. It just went like tingle, 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 tingle. And then I had all my feeling back. At that moment, I also started to take note of my surroundings, and I could hear the guy I hit was screaming his head off.
Oh no.
I broke his leg, and the the ambulance had to come out on the field and take him out. Again,
wow.
I didn't tell anyone about it. I just sort of noted it in my mind.
Well, and you probably also didn't want to take attention away from
the guy with the broken leg.
Yeah. I mean, you feel like, okay, I'm walking. I guess I'm pretty good.
But do you remember me being electrocuted?
Yeah. It was my barrettes that you use. So they're these metal barrettes that are bendy, and the way you fasten them is you open it by bending it one direction, clip them on, bend it the other direction. Now they're secure.
They like snap. They snap shut.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're perfectly.
So you had found a couple.
They look.
Fit.
They're a perfect fit for an American outlet.
And
they even have a big end and a small end, just like a regular outlet.
Yeah, they do. And this is probably why we have outlet covers now for all children nationwide, required in all daycare centers and family child care providers. Because of this very incident.
I was patient zero.
I don't remember how old you were. You weren't toddler. You were like 4 or 5, right?
I think I was 4, yeah.
Okay. Mom
was getting ready to go out with our minister, Harvey Pearson.
To some event. There was something going on. And so she was busy getting ready and upstairs. I was upstairs, and all of a sudden...
Weren't you in the bathroom with Mom?
Mom was. Oh, maybe I was in the bathroom with her because I was somewhere where there was lights.
Helping her get ready, yeah.
And there was, all of a sudden, lights flickered, and we didn't know what to think of it, but they flickered. And then we heard you, but there was a pause. And then you were crying. And so, or something, we knew something wasn't right. And Mom went down and found you.
No, I thought I ran into the bathroom. Did I? That's my. I thought you said I ran into the bathroom and I just yelled, "Burn!
Burn! Burn!" And your little fingers were all they
charred.
They were burnt, but with black marks on them. They weren't just.
It looked like if you took a hot dog and you left it on the grill too long. Yeah.
Yep. And it had cut into you. It split your skin where you were holding the barrettes.
Oh my God!
Had split your skin.
I didn't know that.
It had char marks around it. From the electrocution.
And it was bleeding.
That's when that would make more sense. I just remember that we heard you, and then I do remember your fingers and you saying "burn," and that's when we realized what the flicker of lights was. And you were just like, the only thing you could say was "burn, burn." Your eyes were real big, and you weren't even crying. You were just, yelling this "burn," and then Mom. Then I think you fainted.
Well, I fainted in the car, but
At least at some point.
that must have been rough for you to see, like this little kid just like screaming with his hands on fire, you know?
Well, and simultaneously, that's when Harvey pulled up, and mom, was ready to carpool to where they were going. And mom just scooped you up and took you in the car. And they took you directly to the hospital, I believe. So then you're just left going, I hope he's, no cell phones or anything. So you just wait to find out what the outcome was. And
Oh, so you didn't come with me to the hospital?
uh-uh,
Oh, because
uh-uh.
from my story memory, Mark was carrying me,
Oh,
and
Marcus?
yeah, and he, from my memory, so I'm in the car, and I am calming down a bit, and I
Okay.
say something like, "I smell hot dogs" or something, and then I fainted.
Oh,
And then I fainted
oh,
because I think I realized what I was smelling.
yeah.
And then at the hospital,
It's so wrong to laugh.
it is. I smell hot dogs. And then there's this
Oh no.
dead silence in the car, and
Oh,
I'm like, huh? How come no one's responding? Oh, and then pass out. And then at the hospital, they woke me up by tweaking my nipples. Did you know that?
wow. I think mom told us that. I think she
Apparently,
did.
that's a thing you do. You like there's
You
smelling
do.
salts, but with children, you tweak their nipples. There's like
Yeah.
a response of
Supposed
like,
to tap the bottom of their feet, flick the bottom of their feet usually to get some kind of response. But doing tweaking nipples is another chance because it's uncomfortable, so it usually jolts somebody,
yeah,
to if they can,
yeah,
it'll get your attention.
yeah. And to this day, I feel like I'm overly annoyed. I'm overly annoyed. Like, don't I also had an unfortunate experience at Soap Lake. Do you know Soap Lake in Central Washington? It's a mineral lake. It has all these minerals in it,
Oh,
and you're supposed to Vaseline up certain parts of your body so that the minerals will they're like it's like little sandpaper when you're in the water,
okay.
and if you don't Vaseline up sensitive parts of your body, it will just erode the skin layer or
Oh
something
my God.
and irritate. Well, I didn't do that with my nipples. I did it with other parts of my body, but I didn't do it with my nipples, and so I couldn't wear a shirt for like a couple
Oh,
days. Yeah,
oh my
so
God.
so maybe that's why. But
Maybe
but
that's right.
yeah, and apparently I also woke up and so they tweak me and then they say take off all your clothes because they're gonna put a gown on me, right? And I'm like, why do you need to take off all my clothes? It's just the tips of two of my fingers. This is illogical. I remember I was like
Yeah.
incensed that they made me take off my like just
Oh,
fix my hand, pal. Um,
right.
but anyway, so
Well,
that's my electrocution story, and then of course almost drowning twice. It's a wonder why I'm still here.
it is a wonder.
Sometimes I wonder if I'm in one of those or in alternate. I'm the one alternate universe where Kirk is alive at my age.
Well, and those are the things that happened on accident. And it wasn't until later that I think mom told me stories about you and your friends shooting BBs at each other in the woods.
Yeah. Well, and
I mean, that's on purpose.
one of my friends who
Yes.
he had a very fancy pellet gun that was way more powerful. He hit me in the head, square in the head,
Holy schmoly.
and it gave me a concussion, and I was bleeding down the front of my face.
Oh my gosh.
But it was my fault. I mean, I chose to play the stupid game. And it's funny because we were probably like 8 minutes into the first time we'd ever even played that game before. We're like,
Yeah.
let's play BB Wars, and meanwhile, Chris is like, okay, well, I'll get my pellet gun, and we're like, okay, whatever. And then 8 minutes into the game, I'm like knocked out with blood coming down my face. And again, we didn't tell anybody about it.
I was going to say, did you tell mom?
Um, um, what do you remember about driving out to Spokane?
It felt like forever. as a kid.
So to give people just a background here, we lived on the Seattle side of Washington State, and Mom and Dad's whole family were from Spokane, which is on the eastern side of Washington State, which is about 300 miles east. In fact, their early marriage was in Spokane. You and Mark were born in Spokane, and then they moved out to the Seattle side because Dad got a job at Boeing. And whenever there was any vacation, we didn't go to Disneyland or Europe or any, we just always went to Spokane because it was a chance to see.
That was vacation.
Yeah, it was a chance to see all the family, and it was relatively inexpensive. We would always go in the summer for a week.
Yeah.
And it's hot in Eastern Washington.
Very hot.
So what do you remember? Because we would go out in the truck. So what do you remember about?
Well, when we had the truck, but when we went to Spokane, that was the preferred vehicle, and it might have been the only vehicle, honestly, that was functioning at the time. So you were the youngest, so you fit in between Mom and Dad in the front. And then Mark and I camped out in the back, which would not be allowed legally these days, but back then that's what everybody did. That was just normal. And so with the canopy, Mom would make us a bed kind of with sleeping bags and stuff, and then we had our luggage back there, and we had snacks, and we didn't have the kind of truck window that you could slide and talk to each other, so we had to bang on the window, and try to get someone's attention.
The canopy had a window, and then the back of the truck had a window.
Yeah.
So you had to bang really hard. But I do remember being in the back. I remember.
Eventually, you did.
Yeah, maybe at the age of 4 or something forward,
Right.
I was in the back. Yeah, the canopy would be often stored on the side of the house, which is very woodsy there, and there's a lot of bugs, and so when we would be traveling across state in the back of the truck, all these spiders and bugs because the jostling of the freeway would dislodge all these bugs, and so we'd be in the back. And you describe a bed of sleeping bags, but it's a steel floor bed of a truck with a thin layer of sleeping bags on top of it. It's not a bed. I would just describe it as like less
corrugation.
Yeah. Mom would make us a Tupperware of onigiri, right?
Right. I loved them.
Yeah.
And because there weren't places you could stop along the way. There was Vantage, which was where we'd stop for gas.
And occasionally almost drown, in the Columbia River.
And occasionally almost drown, because that's what makes it eventful. So, and story-worthy. But that wasn't that more normally when we went to and from Spokane, it was as an entire family. The drowning incident, Dad wasn't with us. For some reason, it was just Mom.
Oh.
So we paused and stopped and swam in the river. And some of us almost drowned, but
we forget which one of us.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it'd be really, really hot, right?
Back, yeah. Because you're going through Eastern Washington and stuff.
Yeah.
But by then, most of the spiders had been jostled out of the crevices and stuff, but because they'd all come out all at once. It was insanity back there. There was a war zone between us and the spiders, shoes flying, us, centering up with our backs to each other, like, there's a spider over there. No, I got you.
It's like an alien movie, right?
Yeah, totally. And they weren't little spiders.
No.
They're the ones with the big bodies and the thick legs.
Yeah.
Occasionally, the long-legged ones, but not. They were mostly those big, juicy ones. So to smash them, didn't get rid of them. Now you had to keep track of where you killed them, too, because you didn't want to mess with that either. But very hot. But the snacks, the onigiri.
I don't remember any liquid of any sort.
I was just going to say that. No beverages, though. I don't remember that.
No water.
No water. Well, and nothing came in portable form. You had maybe
a thermos.
Yep.
But I don't remember. I don't remember any concern about water. Yeah. It just sounds bizarre that we'd be having onigiri and nothing to drink.
Right. Yeah. I don't remember it being a problem though either, which is kind of weird
I know.
in it.
I don't remember ever being concerned with hydration.
Mm-mm.
Because, if drinking stuff would mean we'd have to go to pee more often. So,
Right.
what do you remember about Spokane and Hayden Lake? Because it was a huge part of our childhood. It was where
Right.
all of our cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents and all the vacation-y fun. And what do you remember about those trips?
We had a pattern. We would go, and depending on the time of day that we arrived, if it was early enough, we'd always go see Honda family right away. And then um, it was just the norm to hang out and eat and talk and chat until late. Maybe midnight, sometimes later. It felt like, and then go back to Grandma and Granddad Johnson's, and stay at their place and sleep in, which was always fun. Their Grandma and Granddad Johnson's was like a museum in a lot of ways. One, you could see old pictures of Mom, and in some places, and that was fun. But there was always new things to see there, that Granddad and Grandma brought back from travels and stuff. So, and their house was just so unique. That was always fun too.
And these were the houses that Mom and Dad lived in as kids. So
Right.
their bedrooms were like Mom's bedroom was still the same.
Yeah. Exactly the same as
yeah.
what you grew up with. Right.
Yeah.
And then once we were ready, go back and spend time with Hondas, and just they were, to me, that I looked forward to it all the time. That was our vacation. So to me, that was really a fun time, and I think probably the best example of what true childhood can be, because it was true freedom. There wasn't necessarily an agenda for the day. You just kind of did what you were going to do when you were ready. And I remember watermelon and lots of inari, and some maki.
Yeah, I remember the watermelon. I forgot about the watermelon.
Yeah. And I just had a childhood memory come back to me last night. I was watching the Sounders game, go Sounders. And I was eating sugar babies.
Isn't that the caramel taffy
Yes.
thing?
So I was eating those, and then I had some leftover coffee from the morning, and I took a drink of the coffee after eating the sugar babies, and it tasted exactly like coffee nip. And
Coffee nip?
coffee nips.
Coffee nips?
Yeah, they're candies.
Oh.
And Grandpa would not, I mean, there wasn't like candy just out and about, right? But he would have a small bowl of coffee nips, and maybe he just got them out because there was company. I don't know, but these coffee nips, and as a child, coffee did not sound interesting, but these were what were out, and I was very curious, and they were delicious. But now, to this day, because that was my introduction to coffee nips, it was a flashback to being in Grandma and Grandpa Honda's house, because the sugar daddies and the cold coffee together tasted exactly like a coffee nip. So I remember coffee nips from Grandma and Grandpa's house too, and ice cream.
Well, what do you remember about Grandpa Honda?
To me, he was always gentle and quiet, but very attentive to listening. He listened very intently.
Oh, really? Like you would talk to him and tell him about stuff?
Well, if, there was always the group, and he was a quiet observer and listener in the group. But if for whatever reason somebody, the group kind of dissipated a little bit, and there might have been just, one or two people, he would then talk to you directly, and comment on something that was said, and it was more to engage you to talk,
Oh.
directly. So I wouldn't say there were a lot of one-on-ones, but I do remember that was how I remember him engaging.
Yeah. So for context, I don't have that many memories of him because he died when I was 13. In fact, my very first diary entry was on the day that he died.
Oh, wow.
I wrote about that in my first journal entry. I talked about how Dad was upset and sad and how strange that was for me. And it was the first death in our family, you know.
Right.
But anyway, I don't remember much of him. So it's interesting to hear your memories because I can't conjure an image of him talking. I have a lot of images of him sitting in the, because their house, we would be there in the summer and there's no air conditioning and it was very hot and their house was like a perfect greenhouse for the summer sun.
Yeah.
There's no trees or shade. It's, in a constant blast of the summer sun. And it's an old, what they call sort of craftsman home now with a nice porch out front.
Right.
It was a very old house and it hadn't been renovated at all, but it was, very cute. Actually, your house that you live in now, it is very much like that.
Right.
Anyway, so I just remember him sitting in his undershirt, like a tank top, and his like slacks, and he would sit in the corner in the living room like a samurai sits with his hands on his knees.
Yes. And I just commented on that to Cliff because we recently watched Shogun. We just finished watching Shogun, which...
Did you like it? It's so good.
Oh, I loved it.
God, it was so amazing.
It was amazing. I loved it. But I did notice that when...
Toranaga.
Yeah, Toranaga sat in a chair.
Yeah.
Or even when they were sitting on the floor.
Yeah.
The regents, when they sat, he would put his legs wide and his hands on his knees. And it just brought back images of Grandpa Honda, and I almost froze and I was like, that's Grandpa.
Yeah, and you just wonder because Grandpa didn't grow up with, because he grew up in the States.
Right.
It's the way they stand, and it's accentuated in samurai mannerisms, like the way that they duel with their katana. They stand in a very upright, very...
And open.
Yeah, very
open
low center of gravity,
That's very interesting because I never thought about that. But when I don't know how old I was, 3-ish, Mom enrolled me in ballet. We would take turns being crisscross applesauce. But the bottoms of your feet would be touched. And they wanted you to bring your feet as far back into your body as possible. And then the other was they wanted you to keep your knees down while doing that. So your knees had to be flat. I remember them struggling. And I would get in position and dink, 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 and my knees are, completely flat. And so maybe you're onto something there that genetically predisposed to that being just the way your body is built. And
yeah. So I wonder if Grandpa Honda, he just sat like that because it's literally in his bones. I mean, do you remember me being able to put my foot behind my head when I was a kid?
Well, yeah, because you were kind of freakishly flexible, one for a boy. Boys just tended not to be as flexible for whatever reason. But you could put you were very bendy, and you could put your both feet, not just one, but both of them behind your head.
Yeah.
And Mom and Dad were church leaders. They were youth group leaders. And
wait, Mom and Dad were youth group leaders?
Yeah, they were youth group leaders.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were youth group leaders.
Because they were younger congregants, maybe 30 years old at this point.
Right.
And so they were in charge of, what does that mean? Like monthly or weekly get-togethers? Or what does that mean?
I think it was mostly weekly, but occasionally, most of the time they met at the church.
Oh.
But occasionally it would be at our house. And
I do remember
Mom
that.
and Dad had an event, and they were just a bunch of games, a series of games. And one of the games was without hands, peeling a banana with your feet. You were supposed to peel a banana with your feet. And you had amazing dexterity and quietly, in a very Kirk-like childhood fashion, sat. And I'm pretty sure you won. You
Yeah.
peeled the banana in a pristine fashion. I mean, it wasn't even mush and goo. It was just like, sure, I'll do that, and dink a dink a dink. And I mean, but you were very flexible. You were very
Yeah.
dexterous with your feet. You could put your legs behind your head.
I remember this banana thing. So I would have been, like 4 or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember the joke is that, of course, you're not going to be able to peel a banana with your feet. Or if you do, it's going to be all mashed. It's supposed to be for fun. It's not an actual contest. It's just supposed to be an activity that gets people laughing and everyone's just like, oh my God, go, go, go. And then little me is like, I want to play. And so, okay, give Kirk a banana. He doesn't, I don't really get the joke. So I'm just quietly, I remember we were outside in the deck in the backyard of our house. Yeah. And I remember I was focusing so hard on the banana. I didn't know what was happening. And I rarely knew what was happening around me with you and Mark and the other older kids and stuff. So I'm just like, okay, all right, that's a contest. And so, I remember looking at the banana and it was a new activity. So I remember kind of thinking about it for a while. It's like, well, how do I prop up the banana to get proper kind of grip? And then, okay, go slow. And then, okay, now how, and no one's watching me because it's not really an activity for a kid. It's all the older kids are laughing and screaming and stuff. And then someone looks over and sees that I have completely in a pristine manner. Meanwhile, while everyone else is like mucking it up and stuff, I'm just like quietly. Yeah.
And if you could, if people could see you while you're describing it, that's exactly how you were tilting your head while doing it. It was a very thoughtful, you weren't laughing, you weren't, it's just very seriously focusing on how am I going to get this done? I can, I think I can do it. Otherwise they wouldn't have me do it. You're just over there in your own world.
And we didn't have a remote. We didn't have a remote for the TV. We had one TV and it was a dial TV. We didn't have cable. And, I'll be damned if I'm actually going to sit up and turn the channel. So I would change the channel with my foot. And I remember I wouldn't do that when Mom and Dad were in the room because they would say, don't do that with your feet.
Yeah, I do remember that. Kirk, don't use your feet.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, how does he even do that with his feet? I do not have that manual dexterity you have with your feet and your toes.
But you are ambidextrous though.
Semi, yeah, because I do a lot of things, mostly right-handed activity-wise, but I write exclusively with my left hand. But I use ohashis with my right hand, which makes no sense whatsoever.
Like, why do you think that is? Is it?
I think I naturally gravitated to left hand while writing, but I was taught how to use ohashis with my right hand by right-handed people. So I think I just naturally, that's how I continued, was to use it with my right hand.
Did you learn how to use your offhand for things, or are you actually like just slightly left-handed?
Right. I could very well be just slightly left-handed.
Yeah. There's all that stuff about like taking a left-handed kid and like forcing them to be right-handed. Did any of that happen to you?
Nope. Well, I was free to be left-handed in any way that suited me. But sports, I'm all right-handed. But if I have to do something left-handed, it's easier for me to do left-handed things than it is for most people who are right-handed.
Yeah.
I definitely eat with both hands. Do not limit myself. Yeah. I can sit, in a left-handed position. And really it comes down to which side is the fork on. That's what I'll eat with. It's a matter of convenience.
Double the face stuffage,
Yeah. If there's a fork on both sides.
You combine me and you together and got feet involved and, you can really start shoveling it in. What do you remember about food in our family on this topic?
Ooh,
our culture and the way we were as a family. And
right. I do remember that holidays in particular, massive spread of food and never running out. Nothing was ever just gone. It was always refillable and and plentiful.
yeah.
And then having leftovers for days because that was my belief is that was part of the plan. That you have leftovers, so you eat them.
That was obviously a Japanese thing, but was that a white side of the family too thing?
I don't remember having. We would have at Hayden Lake. We would have picnic style family when there were multiple families there at the same time. Then I know aunties and mom, would get food ready, and there was always lots and lots, but nothing like Honda get-togethers.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen. There was just so much good food when we grew up, though. I mean, when we ate dinner together, and mom would normally make enough for 2 nights. We would have the
Hmm.
same meal twice in a row, but she usually served us our food too. Like we didn't serve ourselves. She would serve us. And I'm fairly certain she served me the same amount she served dad. I
Hmm.
think we all got the same amount, didn't matter your age, your size, nothing. We all ate the same amount of food. And clean plate club. You eat it. And we did not have dessert, because who needs that? We just ate a huge amount of food. And so that's just the way it was. Well, when I would go spend the night at other people's houses, I thought I was gonna die. They ate so little. There was, like first of all, they had like four components to their meal, and we had two: rice and something on top of rice.
Yeah.
And in what went on top of the rice had multiple components to it.
Yeah.
But it was a ginormous amount of food.
The sort of quintessential example is wall to wall, inch high gohan, Japanese
Right.
sticky rice, just edge to edge of the plate, and then a giant helping of spaghetti and meatballs on top of it.
Or stew or curry or
Yeah, it's a Japanese American thing. It's sort of a riff on the donburi bowl kind of thing.
yeah.
And it fills you up. You don't have to spend that much money. That's what mom
Right.
said that I didn't realize. She's like, well, when you're trying to feed 6 people on a budget, rice goes a long way to fill people up.
Right. Well, and we all liked rice,
Yeah.
so it wasn't ever a negative, I guess, for me anyway. But
No,
man,
I loved it. Yeah.
comparatively to what others, to find out how other people ate,
Yeah.
it was like, wow. I remember in the middle of the night thinking, I'm so hungry.
Well, because even
melt away.
after dinner, if we wanted more food,
You could have seconds.
Yeah, you could have seconds. But yeah, that's funny. I don't remember, but I do remember, yeah, being hungry. But another thing
and
that
on the plate, there was space between the components. You could see plate. There was plate. What was that? I could never see the plate underneath my food at home.
yeah, you could see plate in between. And yeah.
Oh, man.
And, it was quite a special thing, the 6 of us sitting around that little white round table every night at the exact same time. Dad would come home from work and we would eat immediately. Like, I think Dad got off work at 4:30, I'm guessing, because I think he got home at 5. That was my memory.
I think so.
We would eat at 5:15 every day.
Yeah.
Or maybe Dad got off at 5 and he got home at 5:15 and we would eat right away.
Yeah. It was pretty quickly after he got home, right?
Yeah. It was very routine. Well, what do you remember about church? I always think of it as like hippie Christians, young hippie
It was
Christians.
very open conceptually, philosophically, compared to what we initially had grown up with. And I remember attire, that you could go in jeans and that was okay. And getting dressed up wasn't important.
And probably relatively young. Like they were all old to us, but
Right.
the main congregants, the parents, were relatively young. Harvey was probably relatively young. He was probably in his 30s when he
Mhm.
was the minister there. And we called him Harvey. That was
Yeah.
like, we didn't call him Pastor Pearson or Mr. Pearson. I remember it was purposeful that we called him Harvey,
Right.
which is a name you don't hear much anymore. Do you remember politics being talked about at church?
Not to my knowledge.
I don't
Uh-uh.
remember any of that. In fact,
Mm-mm.
the one time I do remember it was when I went to camp, and it was not put on by the church. It was like another organization had this church at Pleasant Valley, and I remember they were talking with us about how John Denver was evil because he had a song that mentioned, Rocky Mountain High, that kind of stuff, and how it was a reference to drugs and the devil. And I'm like 11 years old or something, and I'm like, how dare you denigrate the great name of John Denver? He has been on the Muppets multiple times. How dare you? He is America's sweetheart. He is a national treasure. Have you
Right.
seen his hair? How dare
It's
you?
perfect and swishy. Not only that, he was the prime non-heavenly figure in Oh God. There's a movie. Oh God. He was in it. So come on, there's evidence right there.
That's another thing. But I want to ask you about that movie, Oh God, but about church.
Yeah.
So by contrast, if I noticed this conservatism being discussed at camp, and I'm thinking that's wrong, I immediately rejected it as there's something wrong with that. And that tells me that at our regular church, which we went to all the time, we were there all the time for regular service and other things, then we must not have been hearing that at our church.
I don't think so.
I don't remember talk about gay people or border
You say
security.
you don't remember that? You don't remember?
I don't remember there being talk about that.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Not at all. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Okay. Because I also remember I'm in high school and I'm with someone and we're at the piano playing Imagine by John Lennon. And this newcomer, this new member walked into the main hall and said, "You can't play that song because that song's an atheist song because it's about no heaven above us, no hell below." And then there again, I remember thinking, oh, you're a new person. You don't know what you're talking about. But it's kind of sad that like that's what Christianity became in our country,
Yeah.
It
Right.
became politicized and it became conservative, whereas it felt the opposite, really, when I was a kid. It felt anti-establishment, it felt anti-conservative, and we didn't talk about liberal ideals, but I remember the central feature of our church was love and charity and non-judgment. I remember that
Yeah.
being I mean, do you remember that being talked about a lot?
I would agree with that. I don't remember it being specifically stated that way, but you saying that would encompass what I believed would be the message. It was non-denominational by their specification, but I remember Mom expressing that there was the only guidance, which was, I believe, the reason why Mom picked this church, was the Bible. That was it. There was no extra, that there weren't other covenants or other reliances or references. And so in my kid mind, she was trying to express that nothing else matters, nothing else, just love. And that's it, that it's very simple. And so that's what stuck with me, was that's what it was about. And that was what was carried through, was that non-judgmental and not and inclusive. I didn't even know that word back then, but it was anybody and everybody. Didn't matter where you were coming from. It didn't matter. It didn't
How do
matter
you
what
think-
other churches you came from.
How do you think that your experiences, because you went through church, you started at Issaquah Christian when you would have been like 8 or 9 or something when we moved to Sammamish, and you went through the church through your formative years, middle school and high school. You had a lot of friends at church, some friends at church, and you and Mark were active. And
Right.
how did that influence you?
Looking back, I think that was ideal. The form of how Christianity was taught, I guess. And I don't know if if I remember correctly, but I think mom has even more liberal views than the church we were in with respect to Christianity and different viewpoints and things. And so I just remember learning a lot from side comments mom would make. She didn't there, mom and dad, to my memory, didn't ever just sit us down and teach us, about Christianity. That was the point of going to church, but also encompassing that in life as well. But I just remember side comments of mom expressing different thoughts, or explaining different things,
like what?
my I remember my best friend one time was talking to me in the car, and mom was driving, and so she could overhear the conversation. And I just remember, and this friend had gone to church with me. Her family did not, but she did, and she was welcome to come with me. And so she would come pretty regularly, and she at one point said, I don't think I'm going to heaven. And mom overheard that, and she said, why? And this was after a while of going to church. And she just said, I just don't think I am. I don't think I'm good enough. And we would have been, I guess, 10, 11, 12 at the time. So, and I just remember my mom saying, it's not about being good enough. You're just in. You're just in. And I remember seeing the relief in her face. Like, you could actually see the impact and the realization. I didn't think, I'm listening and kind of going, yeah, 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 that's right. But actually seeing in her face this relief of, you mean I don't have to earn it? I don't have to be good. I don't have to be perfect. And she just kind of like, oh, okay. Okay. And she trusted that, and that was a big moment. I don't know if she would remember, but I do remember the impact of what mom said on her, and that it meant a lot, especially in that moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a powerful story. What other things would mom say along those lines? I mean, I'll tell one brief one. In the 90s, when gay rights was being talked about more often, by that point, I was very adamant about gay rights, gay marriage, non-discrimination. It was very upsetting to me, the way that gay people were being treated in the 90s and before that, but I was very acutely aware of it in the 90s. And it was being talked about more in the media and among religious circles. And mom said that I think her, Issachar Christian was changing, or I don't know what she was reacting against, whether it was the change in the church or just talk in the media. But she said that she knew that the dominant Christian notion was that gay people were wrong and sinning. And she said that she had personally come to the realization that that was wrong, that God wouldn't make people that way if it wasn't okay for them to be that way. And she didn't have some guru that she was following. There wasn't a figure that she could latch onto. She just came to this realization herself. It just, given her morals and her understanding. And she didn't have to come to that realization. She didn't have anyone close to her that was gay that she had to fight for or listen to. She wasn't hearing personal stories of, struggle or anything. She just very quickly, similar to the way that during the 50s when mom and dad met, she, of course, knew the anti-Japanese sentiment and the pro-white sentiment, and she, without thinking much, she didn't have to think very hard, and she didn't have any influence telling her to think otherwise, and yet she just independently said, well, that's dumb. Why would that be? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Alan Honda he's an attractive man. What's the difference? Or boy, I guess at that point, what's the difference? And hearing her say that, I remember feeling so proud of her, and I guess to be her son, that without struggle, without convincing, she just knew, like she thought about it for 3 seconds. It was like, oh yeah, That doesn't
Doesn't
make
make
any
sense.
sense at all, you know? And she didn't have to wrestle with a religious conundrum. She just said, no, there's no way that God would feel that way about gay people. That's wrong.
There's something that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And I'm not busted up about it. I don't have to go down some journey of discovery of like, how do I reconcile Christianity with this notion? Like, she's like, nope, that's it. Moving on.
Right.
I thought about it for 3
And now that you
seconds.
said that, I remember her saying that at some point.
And this was in the 90s, you know, when
Right.
it wasn't normal. I think at that point, like the American people, like 80 to 90% were against gay marriages, that kind of thing. So do you remember Mom saying anything else along the lines of religion and how to live, how to think, how to be?
I remember it was epiphany for me when Mom said she didn't necessarily agree with everything that was preached. And to me that was like a what?
When was that? Like 80s?
Yeah. Yeah. It would be when I was either late junior high or, in high
What do
school.
you think she was reacting against?
Well, it was a general comment to lead into, I don't remember what we were talking about, but she just said, kind of matter of factly that, yeah, I don't necessarily believe everything, and then kind of going, wow, I didn't even know that was an option. Like I thought you have to be all in or all out, not from mom and dad, but just that was the package, that's what you buy into is this is what we believe as a unit. She had given a few examples of things that she didn't necessarily think were on point. And she didn't have, contest them, but she had questions about it.
Do you remember what it was?
Because she said other things, and my mind was still kind of grasping all of this because I thought, oh, that's an epiphany, that this is news to think that you can think differently and still support. She doesn't believe that only some people will go to heaven and that you have to do all these steps to go to heaven. And her rationale was that there's just too many people who don't even know about God. And they're innocent and why can't they go, just because they don't know. And so that was her basis for why she just felt like that just can't be. It doesn't make sense. And that those people don't get to go simply because they don't know. Or maybe children of a family who think differently. Why do those children not go because they haven't been exposed or they've been exposed to something different? Or it was something that she didn't buy. And she didn't have an answer. It wasn't like, this is the way it is. It's just, I just don't feel that is the message. I don't feel that that's what we're supposed to believe, that there's a limit and that there's that only certain people qualify.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we're talking about this because I wouldn't initially think of Mom as a philosophical person or someone that even talks along these lines, because she's not one of those people that at dinner will just kind of yammer about her thoughts and will pontificate or try to convince you of something. She's not anywhere even close to that. But there are these moments where she, in all likelihood, is saying something, not just reflecting. She's saying something to you. She's trying to guide you.
Right.
And that's interesting to think, because that doesn't fit with, if you met her and hung out with her for a while, you wouldn't think she would do those kinds of things. But I think she does think about that. I think it does occupy her mind of where are these children, these younger people, where are they going in their head, and how can I help them, right? Do you think Mom has that orientation?
I do, and I think it might have come from her own experiences, because if you actually go back and think about Mom's life, she is thinking outside the box a lot.
What do you mean?
Well, racially speaking, when you talk to her about it, it would have been way easier to go with the flow, to be with the majority, but she's not going with the majority, but not because she's a rebel and she resists it. It's just she's thinking about it like, wait a minute, what is the basis for this belief? So she doesn't just follow or do it because it's what her family or her friends or her generation are doing, and it's not to be trendy.
Right. Independence. I think that
Yeah.
it has its roots in mom wandering her neighborhood when she's 3 years old without any supervision.
Right.
It's like,
There's a certain amount of independence that I
yeah,
think was fostered in that, she didn't necessarily have a mold that was on her,
yeah,
that she could reference necessarily. And so it's based on observation and self-developed. And so everything from that point on, I think she was always just kind of qualifying on her own, and um, maybe I don't know, but maybe because she had already been and survived on her own, it gave her that confidence of this could isolate me, because so many times that's the fear, right? Is even if you think differently, you might not necessarily express it because it could isolate you and alienate you from people who matter to you very, very deeply. So to behave or think differently would make you very vulnerable, socially speaking. So I think maybe while she wasn't compelled or felt the need, I don't think she did, to, make statements and, take a podium and express these things. She would take in the information, decide whether it made sense to her. And if it didn't, it didn't. And now we move on, and she would behave according to her own beliefs.
you seem that way.
Oh, well, I guess I would hope so. I guess I would like that very much if that is the case. I hope people feel that way. I've never really thought about it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see you as a follower or as someone who adheres to things that don't make sense to you.
Right.
I don't see you as someone that would sit back and grin and bear it, so to speak, when it's counter to your values. I don't see you like saying, well, what do I know? you know?
Oh, I'm sure there have been scenarios where I do that, but there are times where sometimes, you feel at your core that things are just not right. It's just not right. It doesn't make sense, or it's not fair, or it's not just.
And you're an assertive person.
Yeah, maybe sometimes not in my own best interest,
What do you mean?
but I don't know. Um, Sometimes it can be, you got to know when, and I don't always say what I think, but when I do get to that point, I don't know. It has been sort of something that has paid off. I don't even know if that's the right term, but has been a positive, and then sometimes it's been a negative. So I guess with some experience, there's some recognition of, is this the time, or do you do it all the time?
Yeah.
And are you really that person if you don't do it every time? But I think there are times where if it's just me, you can be a little more vulnerable. But when it affects other people, you have to take that into account. It's like, well, I could say something, but it will influence or impact other people that I care about, perhaps negatively, if you were to say something in the moment or at the time.
So switching gears, we watched TV. We didn't have cable, but we had regular broadcast TV, and there were certain shows that we watched religiously. Like we watched Happy Day. We watched Happy Days. That was must-see TV at like 7:00 on a Tuesday or something.
Yeah.
And then eventually afterwards, they had the spin-off show of Laverne and Shirley. I remember watching those two shows every week. What do you remember about watching TV and what shows we would watch?
I remember loving Happy Days, but even more Laverne and Shirley, and Love Boat. Come on, man. Love Boat, Fantasy Island.
Right. So Love Boat, I would occasionally have permission to watch with you guys because because my bedtime was 8, and Love Boat I think started at 8 on Saturday, and then Fantasy Island was at at 9, I think. That was the really rare event, was that I could stay up late enough to watch Fantasy Island. And, I've watched clips on YouTube of those two shows. It's not made for kids. It's definitely, it's not like raunchy, but the storylines are for adults.
And the funny thing is that when I watch them back now too, I'm thinking, gosh, there's so many innuendos and, hooking up, concepts. And it wasn't like it went over my head, but I certainly don't remember that being the focus for some reason.
Yeah.
But now when I look at it, it's like, geez, what, why was I watching this? It's all about finding that partner and, waking up the next day. And it was just really, I didn't remember it all like that. Even watching Friends sometimes.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, because I wonder if they just rode that line so well. And since us kids were so not exposed to adult jokes and sexuality, that we saw it, but it didn't register to us the way it would to an adult. Like on Love Boat, it was pretty much a constant thing. When I watch clips, sexuality is pretty much in every scene. There's like women in bikinis. There's some dudes checking out, or the workers like Gopher and Isaac checking out like some woman that walks into the bar, like, ooh, look at her. And, it's definitely giving us notions about gender and about sexuality and everything, which could be commented on, but I don't remember it infecting my head with a bunch of information about like, it's not like I went to school the next day and was like suggesting girls in my class wear bikinis and leering at the girls. Like, I don't remember that. So it was like just enough so that adults could have that material in the show, but not enough so that kids would be focusing on it or something. I don't know. It's a weird thing to look at. Or we were being corrupted constantly and we just didn't
know.
We just didn't know.
Very subliminal.
Yeah. But yeah, Fantasy Island as well. What else do you remember watching?
Younger, we watched Sunday nights, I don't remember the name of it now, Disney, but also, so there was some feature from Walt Disney, but then followed by Mutual of Omaha, Wild Kingdom.
Yeah. Mutual of Omaha. Yeah. and Mutual of Omaha, that's just like an insurance company, right?
I know. It took me a long time to realize that wasn't actually the name of the show. It was just called Wild Kingdom.
And because Mutual, what does that even mean exactly?
Yeah.
I forgot about that. So that was Sunday.
That was Sunday. Yep. And then it was bedtime after that.
So the Disney would be like Bambi or something like that, Dumbo.
Yeah, or a clip, not even a full, I don't remember it being a full movie.
Oh.
Those were reserved for the theater, but like Mickey Mouse or
like a short,
yes.
Or Goofy, like a short Goofy thing or something.
Right.
Old stuff, like from the 30s and 40s, right? It wouldn't be new stuff.
It was a little newer than that, if I remember right, but it was shorts, like you said. It wasn't the full movies. And then Peanuts, watching any Peanuts come holidays, that was always a big moment. Or the animation, the Rudolph.
Claymation, yeah.
That was huge.
Yeah.
And The Wizard of Oz, no matter how afraid you were of watching it, you still watched it every time.
Well, that was Mom's big thing. Whenever it was on, she would make it an event. She was like, we're all going to watch it together, right?
I do remember it being significant, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also remember that it was kind of like even if Mom didn't, we would have watched it anyway because it was a thing.
Yeah, so those were all the events, we would have done all those together. I remember doing all those TV events together. What else? Do you remember any other shows? Because that only covers like 2 nights. Tuesdays 3 nights. Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday.
Sunday was also golf. That's what Dad would do. He would watch golf.
And football.
But he wouldn't watch it. He would turn it on and then go do something else, yard work. But he would come and check on status. And then,
Yeah, golf to me bummed me out always as a kid because it meant the end of cartoons, because there was
yeah,
this brief showing of Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny and stuff from like 8 to 11 or something, and then golf would start. Ugh,
watch
and
it
and,
the
and how
rest.
funny it is that on the same channel, because we only had 3 channels, so you'd be watching Looney Tunes, and then there'd be a commercial break, and then there'd be golf, because you didn't have like the golf channel and then the cartoon channel and everything. Anyway,
As a family, we always did our Christmas Eve movie.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was the thing.
yeah, yeah. That was a big deal to me. Someone, or I think I was being interviewed on a podcast, and they were just listening to me talk about movies, and they're like, "Do you come from a movie family?" And I was like, "No." But then I thought, well, actually, probably in our suburban way. We didn't have literature and books,
Right.
but
Maybe by TV. I think because, I mean, it wasn't like we grew up going to the movies. That wasn't a norm. So it was a big deal to go to the movie.
yeah. But we did go to the movies as a family.
Star Wars was huge.
Yeah, like some of the big movies that were huge to me, I saw with my entire family. Yeah, the first Star Wars, Empire Strikes, of course, Empire Strikes, but also Indiana Jones. I remember we saw that as a family at John Dan's Theater in
Yes.
Bellevue. Yeah, Christmas Eve, we would always see a movie together, and
Yep.
that was weird because Christmas Eve was supposed to be for other things, and we would do those other things as well, but
Right.
we were some of the only people in the movie theater. In fact, a lot of times it would be hard to find a movie theater that was even open on Christmas Eve.
Right.
So
Do you remember the very first one?
no, but I remember an early one was Bugsy Malone with Scott Baio
Oh, yes.
and Jodie Foster, a young Jodie Foster, a young Scott Baio. That would have been
Yeah.
1976. It was like a kid movie that was a riff on The Godfather. But no, what was the first movie?
King Kong.
Wait, King Kong. Oh, the one with Jeff Bridges,
Oh, man. I don't remember him. It was with Jessica Lange.
1976.
And I'm pretty sure we were the only people in the theater.
That was the first. Why did we go to that one?
Probably because it was the only one open. That would
But
be
like,
my
why
guess.
did the tradition get started?
That's a good question. I think, let's see, how old would you have been? Was Kevin born yet?
No.
Okay. So it wasn't I remembered that we stopped going to Spokane for Christmas when we moved to Issaquah. But Mom says we stopped earlier than that. And so I had put together the stopping of going to Spokane together with now we fill time with our own things. And so this was a way of starting new traditions since we were ending another tradition.
We did go back to Spokane once or twice, but it was not as much of a routine, right? But yeah, I forgot about that. For Mom and Dad, it was this really different thing. That wait, so we're going to stay on the Seattle side, and we don't have any family out here, and they both come from humongous families where Christmas, from the day they were born, was always the same kind of routine in their families, right? Especially in Mom's family. One of the uncles dressed up as Santa and would hand out gifts and arrive on a sleigh pulled by a snowmobile, and all the decorations and the tree and the food and all stuff, to suddenly just be in their crappy apartment in Renton. And they're thinking, oh, it's just the 4 of us. What do we do?
I thought we went over one time at least when we were in Issaquah still because
Yeah, we did.
we did. Because I remember Mom packing the car with all the Christmas gifts, but they were covered up. And me thinking, how did I miss out on that when I was younger? How did I not see this massive pile of gifts? Like how was I so oblivious to this?
Yeah.
But how Mom and Dad pulled all that off is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. So we would Mom and Dad had a tradition. By the time I remember, we would all sleep in the same room, the 3 of us, and then with Kevin, the 4 of us. mom and dad would wrap all the presents Christmas Eve evening after we went to bed. So, we're all night owls. So we would go to a movie and maybe have dinner before or after. And then at night, we'd come home and hang out, and we'd open one present from under the Christmas tree. And it was a present not from Santa, because Santa hadn't arrived yet. So it'd be gifts from like aunts and uncles, and mom and dad would get us gifts also to put under the tree. And then like one gift they would give from them to us directly. And then we would all sleep in one of the rooms while they were in the living room frantically wrapping everything. And I don't know if you remember thinking this, but compared to other families, mom and dad had saved up all of their spending energies for December, because the amount of gifts we got relative to the amount of income that mom and dad made, I think was out of proportion. I remember feeling guilty talking to friends and cousins about the amount of stuff that we got, but we didn't get anything else the rest of the year. You know? Right. And mom and dad didn't really spend money on themselves, so it just got all poured into Christmas, and so they would have to wrap for a long time, and then mom would sleep outside the door of the room we were all in so that we wouldn't wake up early, because she wanted mom and dad to get a good night's sleep. And it wasn't like a good night's sleep. It would be like, just 4 hours or something. But
and I think what happened one time when we lived in Kent was they had just finished wrapping. And I think
like at 5 a.m. or something, 6 a.m.
really early in the morning. And I was not a good sleeper. Like as a baby, as a teenager, as an adult, I still don't sleep great. I'm just not, I'm a light sleeper. So I think I woke up, and in the excitement of it being Christmas, instead of going back to sleep, I was like, time to get up. And still being a believer in Santa, felt like I'm the one, I can tell everybody, and so I got up and checked to see if Christmas had come, and if Santa had come. So I peeked, and I could see things, and I don't remember what happened after that, but I at some point told mom, went to their bedroom and said, it's time to get up. Santa came, and she was like, no, we just went to bed. And so
but she can't say that because
she can't, and so I think she, somehow told me, it's not time to get up yet, time. And so from that experience, she decided, okay, after that, they're going to sleep in the same room, and I'm going to sleep outside it, so that one, nobody sees, because not everything is wrapped. If it was bigger, you could see some of it. And so she didn't want anyone getting up and seeing anything. And so she slept outside in the beanbag, in the ginormous beanbag we had, that to make sure that nobody got up too early.
That's
and you
funny.
were too young. You were in your own bedroom, but Mark and I would be in the other bedroom. And I don't know if you remember, but mom, she was, again, with her original frame of thought, she was very health conscious when we were in Kent, very food-wise. And so when we got a snack, which we didn't really have snacks, we had meals. When you had the ginormous meals we spoke of, you did not need to snack very often. And when we were younger, you didn't go get your own food. You asked for food, and mom would decide if it was a good time or not. So we kind of, as a special treat, and I think this was the first time when mom was sleeping outside and having us sleep in the same room, we got to take a certain predetermined amount of M&Ms, which was huge. We could have M&Ms, and so having M&Ms and eating them in bed, and that was a special treat before going to sleep. We got, for whatever reason, that was a really cool thing. And she slept outside, and she said we could get up at, I think 7, was the designated polite time.
That's funny because I feel like by the time I came around, it was like 9 or something. I remember
Oh, was it really?
it was a little later, yeah. But
Well,
that's
there's
funny,
more
yeah,
kids, more gifts to wrap. We need more time, man.
yeah,
They
yeah.
probably went to bed at 7.
Well, and by then you guys, you and Mark would have been older, so probably less anxious to wake up, and also teenagers sleeping in. But
Right.
M&M's still loom large in our family. I mean, Mark is known for eating an entire giant family-sized bag of peanut M&Ms in one sitting. So it all started from back then. But yeah, for me, I remember we're all sleeping in your room, and I think 5 or 6, and I had to go to the bathroom. I just, we're all talking or something, and I say, okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and you and Mark were supposed to not let me out of the bedroom because I would see mom and dad in the living room, but
Yeah.
it slipped your mind. You just,
Oh no.
yeah, you just forgot for a second, and so I, bolted out the door, and I'm walking down the hallway, and I see mom and dad in the living room.
Did they freeze?
Yeah, they kind of look at me, and I'm just looking at them with, just kind of like, oh, it's just, because adults did stuff all the time that confused me. I didn't understand how anything worked. Like mom would write a check for something, and I would say, so you can just write a check for whatever you want, for how much you ever want. And she tried to explain banking to me, but I didn't understand. Parents just were this mystery. And so there's always something going on downstairs when I was in bed that I didn't understand, like watching Fantasy Island or something, And so I see them down there, and it doesn't really register. And I go to the bathroom, and then I come out of the bathroom, and I come back into the room, and I think you and Mark were like, oh crap, what did we do? And I'm sitting there just thinking about it, and I'm thinking,
This the moment?
and it was the wrapping paper that tipped me off, because I didn't know. The next morning I wake up and I see that the wrapping paper, because I don't know, I'm thinking maybe they're just wrapping presents it's mom and dad wrapping their presents, but Santa will come, because Santa always had different wrapping paper. And mom would hide not only all the gifts, but also all the wrapping paper. And their bedroom wasn't big. There wasn't a lot of storage room. So, in fact, I remember older kind of coming across where all the gifts were like crammed into their tiny little overstuffed closet and under the bed and stuff. But anyway, yeah, the next morning I sort of put 2 and 2 together. I thought, because it was a back then, and I don't know if kids today have this, but the whole magic around Santa, it's so big and so all-encompassing. All the TV shows, and back then it was a semi-monoculture in the United States, in that it was just all Christian, all Christmas. There wasn't any room for anything else, and we had it at school. We regularly talked about Christmas and Santa in the classroom. Like if you weren't Christian, like you were just screwed in that situation in the 70s. But it was all encompassing, and then at what we would do on Christmas Eve is we would write a note to Santa. I have some of those notes that we wrote, and then Dad the next that night would reply as if he were Santa, and in his block letters, his very distinctive writing, he would say, thank you, Colleen, for your milk and cookies, and you've been a good girl this year, or something like that. And it's in his very distinctive writing,
Yep.
And it was such a big deal. And so the next day I remember just thinking, because I feel like kids today, when they realize it, if they even have this, this culture in their household, it's probably not as mind-blowing to them, because there's a lot of other things in life. Like they probably know kids that don't even celebrate Christmas and that don't care about Santa. They've probably heard other kids say, Santa isn't real. Like, I don't remember anyone saying that at all. Like I would have remembered that. And I remember just having my mind blown by the whole thing. And I think I just went along with it, because I was like, well, what if I say Santa isn't real? Does that mean that they'll stop giving us presents? Like, I don't remember standing up and just going, but that does remind me of one sort of other story. So mom and dad just had their 25th anniversary, or they're about to have their 25th anniversary, because it was a big deal. We had a whole party, and invited family and friends. You know, it was a really big deal. It was almost like another wedding kind of thing where,
Oh,
yeah, very formal and speeches, and there was an ice sculpture, and
Mark made that sculpture. Yeah.
that was in my head, but I'm like, surely,
Yeah.
because he worked at the Salish Lodge and was one of the chefs there and had learned how to do ice sculptures, and so he made this ice sculpture, and you and Mark rapped, and I beatboxed, which is just atrocious to think about. um, and
It's a testament because did we know you could sing yet? Not yet.
I wrote a song. Actually, one of the very first songs I had ever written was performed that night, and it was like "Happy Anniversary."
Yeah.
It was
that's right.
a terrible song, but I sang it anyway.
But it was special.
It was special, but it's very cringy. Like,
Definitely.
I can't. So we were planning or just having that 25th anniversary celebration, and Mark was 24, about to turn 25. So Mom and Dad would celebrate their anniversary sometimes, and of course we'd celebrate Mark's birthday.
Yeah.
And I always knew. Yeah, I always knew. Yeah, I always knew how old Mark was, but I never knew because it's not like parents back then would be like, it's our 19th anniversary. Like, it would just be, it's our anniversary.
Right.
So I'm sitting there thinking, wait, so their 25th is in June, and Mark turns 25 in November, and I'm doing the math, and I'm like, wait a second. So, and I remember I'm thinking, was Mark conceived before they got married? And I'm like, no, that can't be true. That can't. And so I think I had to count it out on my fingers. You know what I mean? It's like, well, wait, maybe it's the 25th is not the 20. And then I figured out, I'm like, oh my God, Mark was conceived before Mom and Dad were married. You and Mark were in another room, and I run down the stairs or something, and I burst into the room. I go, Mark and Colleen, you're not going to believe this. Mark, you were conceived before Mom and Dad were married. And you and Mark look at me and then just start cackling with laughter.
Oh, no.
Because you're like, no, duh.
But nobody's saying it out loud just yet.
Well, also, that I would think it would be news to you, right? Because you're a lot older, and right. Especially Mark would know, because he would know the anniversary. And I remember in an instant realizing how dumb it was for me to think that you hadn't known that already, But it wasn't a topic. What do you remember about, when do you remember learning that?
It seemed like Mark and I kind of almost the same year maybe might have figured it out. But I think Mark figured it out before me, and I remember mentioning it, he and I talking about it. But it still felt like, well, shouldn't say anything, you're not supposed to know. But it was a big moment. I mean, when you do kind of go, oh.
Do you remember Mom and Dad acknowledging that at all?
No, because I don't think we brought it up.
So do you think when I realized this, it might have been one of the first times it was formally discussed?
To my memory. Maybe there was some other time. Maybe. It wasn't really discussed, but it might have been mentioned. Mark and I might have mentioned that we knew, to Mom.
Because I don't remember it being a shameful thing once it was discussed.
Right. Yeah.
Because, they're still together and blah, blah, blah.
Right. No, I think that's true. I don't remember it being, but it wasn't even talked about that much either. Even once it was common knowledge, it wasn't like this big, how did that happen? Kind of thing. It was just, now it's out there kind of thing, and.
Wasn't there a story about you and Mark farting during Christmas Eve when we were all sleeping in the same room?
Well, I believe that was the event, was that I think my room was bigger, or had so there was more floor space.
Yeah.
So we could all be in the same room. but I don't remember if you were there. Do you remember it? It
I
was,
remember you guys telling this story.
oh my gosh, it was the worst. He so I was in my bed, he was on the floor. We were chatting in the dark, and we start gradually drifting off to sleep. So it starts to naturally get quiet, And then I remember just going, wow, I smell something, and just going and thinking, what is that? And then going, is mom making egg salad? And Mark just burst out laughing from the floor, and I did not clue into why he was laughing. I still didn't know why he was laughing, but he in Mark fashion is down there just rolling, and eventually it comes out and it was me, and I'm like, gross, because the whole time I'm taking big whiffs trying to figure out what it is. And of course, that's making him laugh harder and harder because I'm just breathing. What is that? Is mom making egg salad? That it's really hard to fall asleep after that because you keep repeating it, rerunning through it in your mind, and it makes you laugh again.
Yeah, like you stop laughing. You stop laughing for about 30 seconds, and then you just sort of reprocess the whole thing, and you burst out laughing. What about a couple years ago when we were all up in Bellingham, and mom farted at the antique store?
Oh, well, this is going to be a bit self-revealing, but she, we were just out shopping as a family, which was always fun.
Yeah, all of us, like the 20 or 15 of us are all kind of walking around downtown Bellingham.
Finding little treasures and things. And so mom and dad have decorated their new place with purpose, and she was saying she had mentioned she was looking for more Japanese things, I think, something. So when we went in the antique store, I was purposefully going to see if there was anything Japanese that in this particular antique store, which led me to the back. There was this whole corner, and this particular antique store had quite a nice, several nice items. And so, I was kind of checking them out to see if it was worth, telling mom to come back there for. And while I was back there, I decided I was going to take the opportunity in privacy to let one, as mom allows us to say. So I do, but, I'm back there. And then I'm like, well, I can't stay back here. I'm the only one. Anyone who comes back here is going to know it's me. So I migrate casually towards mom, who's gazing into a glass case, and I whisper to her, I farted back there. And she freezes. She goes, oh, I'll do one too. I'll cover for you. They won't know.
What does that even mean, though? Like,
I know. What?
Like, if someone else did she let one right there in her spot, or did she go back?
I don't even know, but I said, I think, we just leave at that point. It was
or
not
was she just using that as an excuse to fart? Like she wanted to fart, but she was waiting for an excuse.
I don't think it was that, but I think she totally had my back, and she felt like that was the way to cover for me. But she was willing to do it if she needed to. I don't think she actually did, but
I thought she did. I thought no, she did. Because then you guys come outside.
Yeah,
and we're on the sidewalk, and I actually filmed this whole thing, and you guys are telling this story, and then I asked mom, so did you? And then mom said, I did, or something like that. I'll show that clip right now if I have it.
But she said something that made me laugh, so I laugh, and then I tooted, and I was like, oh. So I say, I tooted when I laughed, and she goes, oh, I'll toot too, so that nobody will know. But she says it with full voice.
I'll cover your fart with another louder one.
Did you?
Yes.
The trees this way.
But yeah, that's hilarious. Took one for the team.
Yep, took one for the team.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the way to really cover would be to fart loudly and then to say, "Oh, excuse me," because then it really would draw attention away
Draw
from
the
it.
attention.
Because
He'd
if
have
she
to go
just
to the back
farted,
room.
if she just farts, then, people walk in, they smell a fart either where she farted or back in the corner, and they would
Right.
figure it's one of the two of you, I suppose. But
Right. Disguise it, mute it.
Yeah.
Who is it? Who is the farter?
Do you remember Dad cracking us up sometimes?
Oh, for sure. Because he was the hammy one. And it wasn't like this is what his go-to all the time.
No.
He was quieter, he's not a gabber by nature. That's not what he does. But he's always present. But when he went into his funny mode, it always made us laugh. He'd make his eyes big, or he'd make, do some gestures and use a low voice or something, Yeah.
But so he would do this every once in a while, like you're saying.
Yeah.
But one time where I actually thought I was going to pass out from lack of oxygen, when you're laughing so hysterically
so
that
hard.
you can't even take a breath in, that
Right.
we were in the tram at Expo, and it was the six of us, and he went on one of his runs of joking, and I remember I was literally on the floor rolling around laughing and thinking I wasn't gonna be able to breathe. And but yeah, so you remember Dad doing that occasionally.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, and then I learned that growing up, he was the jokester in the family.
That was an interesting statement or observation made, because I just know in our family he's a comical one. He's the humorous one.
But he's not like a Robin Williams or anything. You know? Sort of baseline, he's pretty stable and serious, and
Right.
and like you said, like not a gabber.
Right. Grandma Honda would say that he was always quiet, and that he was sort of timid as a smaller child. I don't think she used the word, but I think anxious was probably, but that Uncle Gary was gregarious and outgoing, and he was more of a talker, compared to Dad. So for me, that was a parallel. It's like, well, that went into adulthood too, that Dad was quieter, but when he decided to do something silly or goofy, Grandma noticed, at times. And so she had a few stories of catching Dad doing silly things or subtle things that she thought he had to kind of calculate to kind of make it happen. She was sharing the story to say, I thought that he did it on accident, but it turns out he was doing it on purpose.
To make people laugh in the family, or to just make himself laugh, or?
I think himself laugh, I don't know, but I think it was mostly just to kind of get a good chuckle, for his own reasons, because otherwise he would have been more outward about it, but it wasn't to get a ton of attention.
When you worked at Sun Sun, the Chinese restaurant, and you were in college and I was in middle school, early high school, and you got me my very first job as a busboy there with you. And I worked Friday and Saturday nights from 6 to 9, and I got paid, I think, $4 an hour, but I got $5 an hour extra in tips. And that was a big deal. And I was 13, and I didn't have a social security number yet. They didn't give them to you when you were born. But what do you remember about me working there? Because it must have been kind of interesting. Like, you're thinking, my younger brother, my little brother is working with me. Because restaurants, it's high stress, and there's all these important things that you have to work together as a team on. The cooks and the wait staff and the host and the busboy and the dishwasher. It was a family-owned business, and
Right.
There were only a few non-family. There was Bonnie, I remember. Was that her name,
Wow.
Bonnie?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
her name.
She was an older white woman, and then there was you, and there was me, and everyone else there was in this Chinese family.
There was one other that he was the dishwasher. He would sometimes bus, but he was a close friend of one of the
Okay.
family.
So what do you remember about us working together?
I remember feeling really pressured for you because, at that time they were my family, my second family. I loved working there. And the people were so kind and became good friends with some of the sisters. And it was ideal. It wasn't when I applied to work there, it was the second job to fill in during the summers so I could make enough money for school. So it had purpose, but it developed into so much more because of the people. And that was such an unexpected surprise. And they were a big part of my life at the time. And I still really reflect back and think so highly of them. And I miss them a lot. So when you were working, I was hoping it would be a similar experience, for you, but also worried, what if he doesn't do well enough? Will they tell him gently? Will you pick up on the nuances? Because they'll probably not want to say anything critical because they won't want to hurt my feelings. That what if, they don't want to say anything bad. And so I was hoping it would be enough for you and enough for them. So I was keeping an eye on you just to make sure, I didn't want you to get in trouble or to stumble in any way. But I remember thinking proudly of you, that you were doing it. He's doing it. He's holding his own.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because, being a younger kid in our family, I didn't have really any chores. I didn't have to clean or do the dishes or anything like that. And to suddenly be in charge of all of these tasks was quite a thing. And I remember it would, mildly plague me before. I'd be like, oh crap. Okay. I've got to work on Friday night. Okay. What do I do? What do I do? And, but everyone was really nice. And like you said, a very family vibe. And I would always get a meal. I remember they would always make me this sort of standard vegetable chicken thing that I liked. And I think I would eat at the end of the night, if I remember right. And, getting $30 every Friday and $30 every Saturday night was a big deal. It was just like, oh my God, like,
right.
What am I going to do with all this money? I mean, I just had never had it before. And, but there's so many things about that job that I remember. I remember the outfits that you guys would wear. You would wear this sort of Chinese dress thing or shirt thing.
It was a top. Yes, it was a traditional red
silk
traditional uniform for purposes of the restaurant. Yeah,
it was always packed because it was one of the only restaurants in all of Issaquah.
Mm-hmm. They had a very loyal following.
Yeah, and I to this day, whenever I see those tea kettles, I think about working there because keeping the tea supply going. Because as soon as a table of 8 arrived, you had to like give them 3 or 4 of these tea kettles and they would run out. And so you'd have to fill it up. And so there was this process of making sure that giant tea dispenser container
was still going.
And it had this little gauge on the side that you could tell like if it, and I guess as a busboy, I might have been mildly in charge of making sure that was filled.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, getting all the tea kettles from the tables and with Chinese food with the lazy Susan and everything, there's a lot of dishes, it's not just like one dish per person. It's like,
yes,
when a table is ready to be bussed, there's a lot of stuff. And
right.
I remember getting quite a sweat going, Another event that I remember is, the traditional teacups, those little, they don't have handles, but they're little tea cups that are common, at least to Chinese restaurants back then, little porcelain and, pretty little design on them. So I have this rack of teacups. It's probably a rack of, I don't know, maybe like 30 to 40 or something. And I'm putting it up on this, stainless steel dishwasher station rack thing. It's a plastic rack with teacups, and I'm putting it up on this thing. I was in such a rush that I didn't put it up properly, and it was not secure. And when I let go of it, it crashed down and broke half of them. And, each one of them is a certain price,
Yeah.
And the pall that fell upon the restaurant, I expected someone to yell at me, but it was so bad that no one said anything because it was so bad, And I remember just going, oh my God, what did I do? And because it's a family business, this money just comes out of all of their pockets. It's not a franchise where the owner is in another state or something. It's like I walked into their house and just started throwing dishes around or something, or I took their car out and crashed it. I mean, that's how it felt to them, and that's how it felt to me.
Yeah.
So no one says anything, and the rest of my shift, I'm just like, I don't know what to do, and I'm beside myself. And then that was a Friday night. I came back to work on Saturday. I'm dreading going in, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what are they going to take the money out of my paycheck? Are they going to fire me? Are they going to chastise me? I'm just terrified. And then I think the owner, the main matriarch, said something, but it wasn't horrible. She was just something like, don't ever do that again. Make sure that it's secure when you put the rack up. And I said, okay. And then that was the end of it. But it was a very memorable moment because I can remember so many details. But you don't remember that? Because I would have talked with you about it and you would have been there.
No, not specifically. But, the way you relay it for sure would have been like this shocker of like, oh no. I remember things getting broken before. It wasn't like it never happened or anything.
But not like an entire rack of stuff. It would be like one plate or one cup.
Right.
Yeah. So tell me a funny story about your kids in the daycare.
Oh, man. Oh, my goodness. This one little guy, maybe 3, had been here since infancy. And one day I was serving lunch. So they're sitting around the table, I believe. And he, at eye level, they're looking at me, not face to face. So as I'm serving food, one of the little guys says, Colleen, I like your big butt. And just genuinely, I like your big butt. Goes about eating his food, and that was it. And I had just, well, thank you, and just carry on.
What was the background of that? Like, what was he thinking, do you think?
No idea. Didn't feel right to ask.
Did he say he liked other things about people? Like, was he that kind of kid?
That was why it was kind of profound, because it wasn't like that was his personality to go around commenting on body parts. So I figured it must have been enough that he was like, wow, that's a butt. I should probably tell her. Nice. That's nice. You got a nice butt. You got it. I like your big butt. Those were the words verbatim. I, of course, had to text his parents right away and say, so just a little quip, just to share. And thankfully, I have had the rapport with the parents too, that they were embarrassed, but also saw the humor in it. And I wanted them to know that I saw the humor in it, So your little guy just happened to tell me that he likes my big butt.
Any other stories? What other stories do you have? I mean, you talk about your own kids, like how Michelle would kind of mess with Jessica.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Michelle, when she was younger, she wasn't a chatterbox eater. She was quieter. And Jessica was a talker. She could talk well pretty early on and enjoyed talking with adults. And
And Jessica is the older one. She's 2 or 3 years older than Michelle.
right. And Michelle was more was quiet, but when she talked, she would talk complete. It would be the right word and talk in complete sentences. She just didn't talk just to talk for the sake of talking. But at a certain age, for the most part, they were independent. Jessica was doing her own thing. Michelle would do her own thing. They didn't really cross paths a ton as far as playing with each other. But it was about when Michelle was 18 months, coming up on 2 years old. And Jessica was on the couch watching one of her favorite shows. And I was in the kitchen, probably making dinner or lunch or something like that. And all of a sudden I hear Jessica just kind of freaking out, and I come around the corner to take a look, and there's little Michelle. She is standing in front of the TV, blocking Jessica's view, but acting oblivious. Like she has no idea why Jessica is so upset and just kind of looking innocent and looking around.
Do
And
do 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 do.
yeah, do. And oh, Michelle, move. And then she just gradually went off to the side as if she didn't know, what was making Jessica so upset. But it was totally on purpose. Totally on purpose. And there was another incident, but it could have been the same day. There was an all-out brawl between the two of them, and they were rolling. I mean, these were little toddlers, and they'd never even shown, and I could hear this oof, and the two of them, and they're just in a brawl, and I don't know what they were fighting over. Most likely the television again, watching a show, but it was just like, we cannot have this. This is not how we deal. And I don't recall that being a pattern. They definitely didn't physically fight as a norm, but being that Jessica was an expresser, and Michelle, she expresses with face, and Jessica expresses with voice, and with her, in talking, she would verbalize what she was thinking, and Michelle would act out what she was thinking. And so you knew what Michelle was thinking because she would show you what she was thinking. So she was a force to be reckoned with.
So you followed in Mom's footsteps career-wise.
Yeah, not on purpose, though.
How was that decision process?
It was out of necessity, really, because we had moved to Duluth, where we live now, and we were coming from a relatively small town. Actually, where we lived was very, very small. Like, I think there were less than 100 people in population count, but it was closer to another much bigger but small town as well. And our children were in childcare at the time, Michelle and Jessica, and we were really looking forward in moving to Duluth that there would be more childcare options, and better childcare options, because we really struggled to find any. And we were lucky that we found childcare that we liked, but it was always a big challenge. And when we came to Duluth, we just struggled even more. And it was such a shock, that to do that. And so we found a childcare provider who was just starting. So she had space, and we had Jacob at the time, and he was a baby. And anyone who looks for childcare knows those are the difficult spots are the infant spots, because they're more limited by license. And so if you're over the age of 2, there's usually options. Under the age of 2, there's very few availabilities. And if there is, it makes you sometimes wonder why. Why do you have an availability? Because everybody else has a list. So when we found some place that could take our children, all 3 of them, it was kind of a big deal. And it didn't work out. And so when we were like going back to the drawing board as to now what do we do? It was this kind of economic decision that, well, maybe if we've ever thought about it, which we hadn't, we didn't think it would be necessary. And I liked my career, so I was looking forward not to being away from the kids, but to going back to work in the career that I liked. But it came at a cost.
For the listeners, what was that career?
At that time, I was a paralegal. So I was really looking forward to starting. When we moved to Duluth, I had worked for a corporate company in the town that I lived in, and it was quite a large company, actually, in their law department, and thoroughly enjoyed that and was looking forward to continuing in some capacity.
Yeah, and I imagine the thinking for you, because by that point you'd sort of moved around a few different places. You're
Right.
a young couple, young kids. You move to Duluth, you're probably like, okay, this is where we're going to stay for a while. I can finally get my career actually past the first few years and grow. Both of us, we can put roots down. So I'm guessing for you, you were looking forward to that.
Right. It was, there would be not only, childcare options, but professional options. I had, when we lived in Port Orchard, I worked for a law firm in Seattle and absolutely loved that as well. But, every office has its personality. So you never know, what I worked in big offices, I worked in smaller offices and
Were you in Columbia Tower working?
Yeah.
Which is the biggest skyscraper in Seattle.
Right. That was kind of a shocker coming to Duluth, was this kind of a realization that maybe this isn't going to work out, that we have competing goals that aren't quite jiving. And
meaning kids with career.
Right. And then when in the summer, because Jessica was old enough to be in school at the time, so she was only in childcare during the summer. So during the summer, it basically meant that I would be making no money. It would all be going to childcare to cover all three kids. And so it started to become kind of a does it make any sense situation. We're not finding something that we feel comfortable with. And not only that, I'm not even making money for, a quarter of the year. Does this even make sense? And so it became a realization that maybe we need to think differently, and this might be an option.
Yeah, I think this is a common conundrum for a lot of families. If you had liked your paralegal office more in Duluth, might you have thought differently?
Maybe, I had worked for them for a while. It was okay. It wasn't the experience that I had had other places, but I enjoyed the people that I worked directly with a lot. And I've told others this, that because we had daycare in our family, I knew that wasn't what I wanted. I knew it impacted the whole family, even though the daycare that mom had was a great one, and our house was a really nice layout for that she had. But I also knew you had other people in your home a lot, and so it wasn't private. Whenever in the morning I would come down for breakfast before school, you just have to do a double check to make sure there's not somebody at the door. You don't come down in your pajamas. You don't, you just pay attention to things. And so it was something that I really didn't think suited what I wanted, in our house.
That's funny. People, I talk about this sometimes, and there have been listeners that have reached out and they'll provide condolences for what I went through, which, because I'll talk about how I'd come home as a snot-nosed teenager and I just want to go to, and I was a go to my room teenager anyway, but teenagers just want to go to the room regardless, right? So I'm just like, I'm going into my room and I would open the door and mom wouldn't have the time to grab me and say, there's a kid in there. And so I would open the door thinking I've arrived finally at my home base, and I would close the door and I would just be able to decompress. And I'm weaving through a bunch of kids as just getting to my front door. And then there would be a kid in my bed taking a nap. And I would, And it was this complicated feeling because the kids were so helpless and sweet, and I would often scare them, right? Because I'm busting into the room and they're not expecting to be woken up from a deep sleep during a nap, and this teenager is like scowling at them, and I would feel bad, but I would also be kind of frustrated, I guess. But I don't remember resenting it at all. I don't remember it being like
and I didn't resent it either. I mean, there were moments, where it was like, I just really need to go to my own room, and not being able to.
Yeah.
But it wasn't an ongoing everyday thing, and mostly, and probably you too, I didn't come home directly after school. So it wasn't a conflict most of the time.
Yeah.
I just had after school activities that made it so that I wasn't coming home when the kids were napping. But there were times where you're like, just you're kind of counting on that. And then you can't. But it really, it wasn't a big invasion. But that was what our kids grew up with, was kids being in bedrooms. And it's not, it's hard on them.
What about the identification of being because that's a different identity, right?
Yeah.
As a paralegal, you're in a professional environment with suits and offices and invoices and all that kind of, and it's high power legal stuff,
Right.
And by the way, I remember you contracted me one time to take pictures of a Costco in Central Washington. Do you remember? It was for an insurance gig.
Oh.
And you needed outside and inside photographs of a Costco or a Safeway or something.
That's when I worked for the mortgage banking company, probably.
Okay. I drove out there, and you guys paid me like a lot of money. I remember thinking like, wow, like I'm going to get paid like $100 just to drive to the Central Washington, take a bunch of pictures. And of course I'm taking it with my point and shoot. So I've got to get it developed, and then I've got to mail the photographs to you anyway. But, so that's quite a big identity shift. Was that also hard for you?
Yeah, very big. I liked the autonomy I had when I was a paralegal, but it was a big shift. It helped at the time to think that I wasn't changing my identity long term, but it was still really hard to know that I had worked to develop my own career.
Yeah, I mean, because in high school you worked really hard, and then at UW we talked about that last episode about magna cum laude. Really worked hard in college, got like fantastic grades. Post graduation, you created your own career and were a go-getter. Up until that point, you're the office worker, the professional, the person who dresses up in a pantsuit and brings a briefcase. You had all that kind of stuff, and you'd been building up to it all this whole time. You were the academic one, the most likely to succeed sort of person. And then here you are in a situation where monetarily you have 3 kids that are just draining your paychecks, and you're just thinking, okay, I guess temporarily I'll take a break. That's where you were at.
Right. That's where it is at. And it was conceptually a really, really hard thing to decide to do, because, in reality, I did recognize at the time that it could be permanent. There was always that chance. And so was I willing to do that? And, a lot of it was the equivalent of being an at-home mom, where some people say, yeah, I meant to stay home. And by the time I returned, I wasn't marketable at that point. And it was hard to re-enter the market. And that was really the gist of what it was in our era at that time, was that if you leave, it's really, for a good chunk of time, it's hard to re-enter in the same capacity that you were. And so I had to take that into consideration as well, that this very well could be, even despite our intent, it might have nothing to do with us. And this might be what my life becomes, that this may become a long-term career. And going back to Mom, I was grateful for that. She showed that it was a viable option. This is something that can be done, and it can support your family. And I do remember that we were notably better off with mom working, and she had a very successful daycare, and she created a daycare from no prior. I mean, we weren't in daycare, so it wasn't something that she had a basis to build off of. And
Well, daycare wasn't really a common thing in the late 60s, early 70s.
right. So she, giving me that background of this can be done, and this is another option to provide for your family, that it made it an option that I might not have been able to consider had I not been exposed to it and seen a successful, caring environment that another person had done, and created themselves, and that it provided for their family, and also allowed me to be home with our kids, which was appealing. That was really the real plus, was to be home with our own kids. So, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity to have been able to do that, to be home and have the memories and the structure that it gave us as a family. So,
do you mourn what could have been?
Sometimes, yeah, there were times where, because there were various stages of times, and my friends here can remember sometimes when I was trying to decide, is this the time that I switch careers? Is this a point in time that it makes sense? Or do I go back to school? Or, so it was always on the back burner early on as to what next. Is it going to be going back to what you did? Does that even make sense? And in the beginning, it didn't make sense to go back to work when it was working so well for the family. So at various times it was, yeah, you could go back, but it really wouldn't better the family at this point in time. It wasn't going to add to quality of life for us.
Yeah, meaning that you're at the calculation of, well, if I go back to work, then that means I have to start paying for some childcare, right?
Right.
After school and summer, I guess. So there'll be that income benefits versus cost. And then you have the fact that you're not there with the kids.
Right.
As someone that also works at home, self-employed, there are so many nice things that you get from having that kind of career. And there's so many bad things you get to avoid. I mean, all the politics at the office,
right,
the commute, the fluorescent lighting, the crappy coffee in the break room, that one coworker that you just can't stand, someone in the elevator wears too much perfume, the after hours activities that you have to attend, otherwise it makes you look bad, the new boss that just drives everyone crazy. There's just so many things that you wake up, you put on your comfy pants that apparently makes your butt look good to one of your kids, and you laugh and you hang out with kids and their parents, and you get to hang out with your own kids, and you have your own bathroom. That's another thing. I mean,
yeah.
Going number 2 in the work bathroom, forget about it. Like that's horrible. You got to use your own toilet paper brand. Lunch break, it's just in your own kitchen. Like, there's so many nice things, pros and cons, but
right.
To me, just a lot of the stresses of American corporate working life are just eliminated when you are self-employed working at home primarily.
Right. And that was definitely an economic factor, even, was when deciding to turn over to a different career, was, factoring in parking and gas and the clothes I have to buy to do what I do. And that's where it became a wash. It was like, when you factor all that in alone, that's a good chunk of change. Things have changed a little bit. Not everybody wears, quote unquote work clothes as much as maybe in the 80s and 90s, but it is definitely a plus to not have to worry about that. I wear everyday clothes and I don't commute. I don't have to worry about the weather because where we live, weather's a factor for 6 months out of the year. Parking, walking, and for me, with our kids being so involved in sports and such, I can only imagine the guilt, sometimes with asking for time off to go see their activities. And when I did work outside of the home, when our children got sick, even just staying home with sick children, you always felt like you needed to, go back as soon as you could to one, keep up on things, but two, to show your loyalty. It was important that you didn't look like a slacker, and you're using your kids as an excuse to stay home. So there were some huge benefits that I did not factor in because I didn't know to think about them, that became part of the decision later on, which is I do now know what it's like to be my own boss and not have to ask permission to do certain things. If I'm sick, I'm sick. If my children are sick, the children are sick. And I am going to my child's soccer game, and it does not have to be a momentous occasion to do so. So it was a blessing to have grown into that, I guess, to have been able to be there for our kids in a way that I would have wanted to. It would have been a real big pull and tug on heartstrings to have been in the office and not feel that I was there in the way that I wanted to be there for them.
Yeah, I mean, I visited sometimes your house, and one of the times I witnessed this, that you'd pack up the kids in the car, your kids, including the daycare kids, and you would drive your kids to the elementary school up the street.
Oh, yeah.
And then when school got out, you'd pack the daycare kids into the expedition and drive. And so for your kids, if they weren't at school, they were with you. And also they didn't have to go to a daycare. They could be in their house and have friends, slash customers that would come in, sort of like Kevin had all these friends because they were his age. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's such a huge plus to have that. Okay, we've been talking for 3.5 hours, but I want to provide an open opportunity if there's any other stories.
Just like we've mentioned in the past about how what you've had your whole life, it's not that you take it for granted, but it's that no different. And I've learned to appreciate that, what we grew up with was not always what everybody experienced, the closeness of family. I always knew that mom and dad would be home. I always knew I would get to do activities if I needed or wanted. It was basic, but it was a lot at the same time. That was something that not everybody grew up with. And I think that was really special in that way, that we can look back on our childhood and note that there's imperfections, of course, but there's also so much that we had that we took for granted because we got to, we were privileged in that way. And I think our expanded family, on just that too, knowing where we were going every holiday, that going with Auntie Carol, going to Spokane and seeing family and getting to be with family. I think that's not always the case for many. And if you don't have it, maybe you don't miss it, but it's something that I think is really important and was a big part of growing up, I think, for us. So, and I liked having older siblings. I liked having younger siblings. It was, a lot of people ask me, what was it like being the only girl? I never felt like the only girl. Me being the only sister did not feel like that was a factor, me being a sister, other than that I was the one who did primarily the watching, that babysitting and whatnot. That was the presumption.
Well, I got the hand-me-downs for both you and Mark, so dressed like a boy and a girl, alternatingly. And I remember there would be times when I was a young kid and people thought I was a girl because of the shirt I was wearing. So you kind of did have a younger sister in some ways.
Yeah, I did have a younger sister, but because of being having three brothers, and then I got my hair cut short because the Dorothy Hamill was the haircut of the era at the time. And I so wanted my hair just like hers. But I didn't. I didn't get my haircut that way because the hairstylist told me my hair wouldn't do that. My hair, wouldn't be like that, but we'll cut it as close as we can, which essentially meant that instead of looking like Dorothy Hamill,
You look like Scott Baio.
correct, correct.
Were you going to say Scott Baio? Because
Yes, because that's exactly. And, reflecting the reason I loved Laverne and Shirley, and my two good friends at the time, their names were Annie and Corrine. Annie we would pretend Laverne and Shirley. Annie got to be Shirley, and Corrine got to be Laverne.
wait, does that mean you had to be the big ragu, or who are you? Squiggy?
But, because there were connections to Happy Days, I was Chachi. I got to be Chachi. So yeah, I don't want to say it scarred me, but yeah, I definitely I was mistaken for a boy a lot, and often because as a family they would look and just automatically glaze over,
Yeah.
and just assume I was a boy.
So people ask you, what's it like growing up with three brothers? Is that because the stereotype is that we would be all macho and farting and gross, and you'd be this dainty thing that would have to cope with that? Is that why they ask you that?
That's where my brain goes a little bit. Nowadays I don't know if that's the same presumption because there's different stereotypes, but in the beginning, for sure, I think it was the assumption that it was just that the boys would dominate in the environment and it would just be ruckus and a lot of wrestling or loud, crazy stuff, and being physical. And it just never was. That wasn't our household. And first of all, we were spread out. It was never just me and three boys, until I was 11 or 12.
I wasn't friends with Mark. I wasn't friends
Right.
with Kevin. We were so far apart in age
Right.
that it wasn't like you had, if we were close in age, you can imagine it feeling that way, where
Right.
we all would pal around sort of and do the same kind of stuff and get into boy stuff. But we were so far apart in age, there wasn't anything
wasn't.
like that. Yeah.
No. But I will say, once Cliff and I were married, after, I don't know, for years and years, I had dreams of you and Kevin a lot. And I would just panicking, like, where are they? Where are they? And I would have a dream where, you would be doing something, I would be doing something, Kevin would be doing something, and all of a sudden some emergency would come up and I'd have to find you guys. And I couldn't find you. That was the
Is
dilemma.
Kirk drowning in a river or something?
Did he hurt his head?
Yeah.
Just,
That's funny.
but
That's funny.
for a long time.
I think that says something. I think that says, what I was saying originally when we first started talking, that you were like a second mom. I mean, what kind of big sister has those kind of words? Because, you're associating that with, you get married and now you're really, in terms of definition, separate, and you're no longer there as often.
Mm-hmm.
You were separate from that ability to monitor and be there, and maybe even felt guilty on some level that you had abandoned or something, which of course.
And that's definitely true. It was a responsibility and still feeling accountable, but not having the ability, to follow through, but also guilty because, as you mentioned, being older, our activities dominated for several years, the soccer games and meets and plays and musicals and things. Then, my assumption all through life was then we get to watch Kevin and Kirk do their activities. But then I didn't get to follow through with that.
You were there a lot. You were at my soccer games and my football games. And from my memory, you were at my plays and talent shows and stuff, right? Yeah.
But I felt like not as much, I missed out on your high school to some degree, right?
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
Kevin's games. Kevin's got to watch Kevin and Dad in soccer, and you and Dad in soccer, but not as much as I felt like you guys came to ours. I didn't feel like I repaid enough, so I felt bad about that.
Yeah, same for Kevin. I only occasionally saw him play football when he was in high school. But the contrast is I don't feel guilty about that. I mean, I guess now I do if I think about it. But I didn't back then. I didn't feel guilty at all.
Yeah.
But you did. So I think that says something
did.
about your role and how you were that whole time, that you were very much attuned and attentive and noticing, and basically I was your first daycare kid.
Yeah. You didn't know it. I didn't know it, but you were. Right. And Kevin too.
Yeah.
As far as daycare children, I do have a story about a little, it's not funny though, but there was a little girl who was about 18 months. And one day I had picked her up, and she was looking over my shoulder towards the front door really intently, like looking. When I would turn, she would go around my head to try to see back out the front door. And it was nighttime, and we were expecting her parent at any time. So I thought her parent was coming through, was in the door. And so she saw her and was seeing her and happy she was there. Well, I looked at her face and she wasn't happy at all. But when I turned around, there was nobody coming through the front door, but she was really looking. I put her back down, and all she would do was from the kitchen, which is a good 20 yards from the front door, she would not look at the door.
Freaky.
And I was freaky. And so I thought, I'll remove her and, let's get her out of the kitchen and move her away from it and distract her a little bit. And she came running around the corner and was looking at the same space, but looking straight up at the ceiling, and was smiling and then not smiling, and then smiling and then not smiling.
Oh my
just
God.
like there was some kind of interaction. And then she turned and came running scared to me. Then her mom came in just seconds later, and I was consoling her. So I was saying, I don't know what's going on, but she sees something, and I don't know what she's seeing. And she observed her doing the same thing. She looked right past her mom and was trying to see behind her up at the ceiling, and really did not care that mom was there at the moment. And so mom got to see it in action too. And just like, we don't know what's going on here. And she went home, and the next day she came and she went right back to that same corner and was looking up at the ceiling and was terrified. But it was just that day and the next day. And after that point, she wasn't old enough to talk about it, but she was old enough to express it, and
you live in an old craftsman house that was probably built around the turn of the 20th century.
1925. Yep.
Oh, 1925. And you just imagine the history there.
Right.
Well, didn't you have a story that like Michelle saw ghosts as well in the house?
She was so casual. She doesn't remember it as an adult. She remembers the stories. But around 4 years old, she came. I was doing dishes in the kitchen, and she came around. It was a Saturday, so it was, we had slept in and things. And she came downstairs and said, "Mom, are ghosts real?" And, I'm just like, and I was like, "Oh, some people think they are," and she left. And then I thought about it, that that's not a typical 4-year-old question. And so I followed up and I said, "So Michelle, why did you ask that?" "What?" "The part about ghosts, And she goes, "Oh, because I saw one." "You did? When?" "Last night." "Where?" "In my closet." And at the time, both Jessica and Michelle shared a bedroom. So it would have been Jessica's closet as well. And Jessica's watching cartoons, but she just stops and starts listening to Michelle. And I said, well, what did you see? And she says, I saw a little girl. What was she doing? She was looking for a bow for her hair. And what did she look like? She said she had on a dress and she puts her arms out like an A frame style dress. And she said it had a tie in the back and it went out like this. And she had her hair up and some hair down, some hair up. And she was looking for a bow to go in her hair. And I thought, wow, that's really specific. And I said, what, did she see you? And yes. Now, what did she do? She said she just waved. And then that's when Jessica goes, you would have told me. Why didn't you wake me up? She goes, I did. You just went like this. So she said that, and I said, what happened after that? And she said, well, she walked into the other bedroom and I followed her. And she said, but she wasn't in the bedroom. She was on the street. She was across the street on the sidewalk, walking to the grocery store. And she said, but there were 3 boys sitting on our awning, which is our roof that goes over our porch, front porch. And she said, there were 3 boys sitting on that. And they had those flat hats and they had those belts that hold on to their pants and go over their shoulders. So she's talking about suspenders, and she said they had pants that only went to their knees. They didn't have long pants. They had short pants. And she said, and they were saying mean things to her, shouting mean things at her. And she said, but I saw one little boy, I could see his bottom because his pants weren't pulled up right. She was very embarrassed about that. And that was the end of it.
Were you freaking out when you were hearing the story?
Yeah, because it was so specific.
Was this around the time that this other kid saw something in your ceiling?
That would have maybe been about a year or 2 after Michelle.
Did you remember?
Yeah, I did. I was like, okay. We as adults, and Jessica says she's never really noticed anything. Jacob has different stories. He said he could at times notice different things or felt different things. Michelle, I would check in with her and ask her if she had repeat experiences. Have you seen anything lately? Or did you notice? And she'd sometimes go, no. And then she'd go, well, yeah. And then eventually she asked me, she said, why do you ask me? And she just goes, they live here, okay? They like it. They live in the attic and they like it here. And that was the end. And there was one other little boy. She said she had names for him. And there was a little boy who liked to run up and down our stairs and hide behind the door in the bathroom. And she said, I call him Speedy, but he doesn't look like a boy. She said he's a brown ball. She says he's a ball and he goes up and down the stairs real quick. And he likes to hide. And I call him Speedy because he likes to run up and down our stairs. So, it was very specific, and she never brought it up herself. You had to ask her. And she said, yes, I see him all the time. Okay. It's nothing special. So, were they imaginary friends? I don't know. Were they just dream visions? That when she describes the girl that she saw, I asked what she looked like. And she said, when you look in the water and it's wavy, she said, you can see through them, but you still see them. And it's wavy. And so that's how she described it.
Wow.
I know. It's very detailed. She has no recollection of anything of any kind now. So didn't traumatize her.
Or you, sounds like.
Or yeah, we kind of waited to see if we felt or heard anything. But we, at that time, just nothing came up. Jacob can now articulate some things that he experienced as a small child, but he was too young to verbalize it. So he can come, he has stories as well, but not ones that he expressed to us at the time, but he remembers having experiences at times.
Well, Colleen or Colleen, we did it again, 4 hours talking. We could
Yay.
talk for another 4 hours. With Umberto, sometimes we'll do these long sessions recording. We'll record like 3 episodes in one go, and it'll be like, 7 hours or something. And I now realize where I got it from. It's from you. Because everyone in our family can do this kind of thing, but I feel like you and I can, and I guess mom too. You and me and mom could do this forever and never blink an eye.
Yeah.
Staying up till super late, just talking about stories and laughing about farts and eating eating M&Ms in the dark.
In the dark.
Yeah.
And ate salad and. Yeah, there's a lot of memories. I sure do enjoy listening to yours and your perspective on them and looking back. And I think I mentioned previously, how it felt like being in the cool club, but it felt like I didn't feel cool. I felt like by proxy, I got to be cool because mom and dad were cool, That's what it felt like to be.
Yeah. Right. That's interesting. Yeah. I felt the same. I felt cool because mom and dad and you and Mark were cool. So
I never felt that cool, but it was just it was a safe and good place to be and fun to look back on,
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, Colleen. Again, everyone take care of themselves. Why should people take care of themselves, Colleen?
Because they deserve it. They really, really do.